Welcome into the Frogs Today pregame show. Jamie Plunkett here at Schollmaier Arena as the Horned Frogs getting set to take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys at home today. It's an interesting day for TCU basketball. They're trying to break a four-game losing streak, but their leading scorer, Mike Miles Jr., is returning today after missing the past 5 games with a hyperextended right knee. It's an important game for the Frogs, who have seen their projected seeding in the NCAA tournament drop by 4 spots from a 4 seed all the way down to a projected 8 seed in this losing streak. We're going to get into the Frogs and what they need to do today to take on Oklahoma State and get the win. We're also going to break down the rest of TCU's schedule to make sure that we know exactly what the Frogs need to do to get into the NCAA tournament today. But first, let's talk about the last time the Horned Frogs and the Cowboys met up in Stillwater on February 4th. It was the first game, actually, of the current losing streak the Frogs find themselves on. They lost to the Cowboys 79-73. No Mike Miles in that game, no Eddie Lampkin in that game either for TCU. The Frogs were led by Emmanuel Miller, who scored 17 points, Shahade Wells, who added 14 points, and Damian Baugh, who added 12 points as well. The Frogs had 5 scorers in double digits in that one. They got down big early, had to fight their way back in the second half before finally falling to the Cowboys by 6 points. There's a difference, though, in this game and that one, and that is that Mike Miles is coming back. Miles is averaging 20 points per game in conference play this year, and he is an energetic scorer for the Horned Frogs, but more importantly, he's a facilitator. He takes attention away from other players as far as defensive issues are concerned. So when you think about Mike Miles out there on the court alongside Damian Baugh, Emmanuel Miller, and Eddie Lampkin, defenses are going to have a harder time trying to figure out who they are guarding with Miles on the court than, say, Shahade Wells. Shahade Wells has played well, though, in Miles' absence, averaging about 11 points per game over these last 6, but it hasn't been quite enough for the Frogs to get out of this losing streak quite yet. We're going to check in with a couple of people today on the pregame show. We're going to go down to Olivia Lee courtside in a little while to check in and see if she's heard anything more about Mike Miles as he gets ready for his return today. We're also going to check in with Jamie Dixon, and Brian Estridge might be by as well to talk a little bit about the Frogs as we get you ready for the Horned Frogs to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. While you're here, though, if you would, you're probably watching this on the YouTube channel for Frogs Today, or you're watching this at frogstoday.com. If you're at either place, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you're signed up so that you get all of the latest information about TCU athletics that you could possibly want. We cover football, we cover hoops, we cover baseball. Now the baseball season is underway. They got a big win in their season opener against Vanderbilt last night out at Globe Life Field. Anything you want as far as TCU athletics is concerned, we've got you covered over at Frogs Today and frogstoday.com. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and like this video and leave a comment underneath it as well, so that so we know that you are watching. We're really looking forward to that. But as the pregame show rolls on here, let's talk about standings for a moment. The Frogs currently sit 7th in the Big 12 with a 6-7 record. They're 17-9 overall, but that 4-game losing streak has dropped them from the top 4 in the conference down into the bottom 4. That's the ship that they're going to have to right if they want to hold on to a spot in the NCAA tournament. But 6-7, they are 1 game behind Oklahoma State, who is sitting at 7-6 in the Big 12 standings. So this is an important win for the Frogs. Kansas State's also at 7-6. They sit at 5th with that tiebreaker over Oklahoma State. If TCU wins today, gets to 500 in conference, that's going to go a long way to bolstering their tournament resume and helping them move back up the standings once again. Baylor currently sits in 2nd, Texas in 3rd behind Kansas, who, despite the issues that they've had midseason, are still atop the conference at 9-4, 21-5 overall. Iowa State's at 4th, and then rounding out the bottom 3, you've got West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma bringing up the rear. The Sooners, though, even though they're 13-13 overall and 3-10 in conference play, you'll remember that on that Big 12 SEC weekend, they beat Alabama, who was ranked number 2 at the time, by about 34 points. So the Big 12 is as stacked as ever. The Frogs are working hard to make sure that they make it into the tournament and finish out their conference schedule on a high note, and they're going to do that today against Oklahoma State. The Frogs are still the leading team when it comes to transition baskets per game. They're averaging just over 20 points per game in transition, and that's something that we can expect to tick back up again as Mike Miles returns to the court today. We're going to take a quick break, though, here on the pregame show. When we come back, we're going to hear from Olivia Lee down courtside as she gives us an update on Mike Miles' status for today's game.
For exclusive interviews and content on TCU recruits, subscribe now at frogstoday.com. Any sport, anytime. It's your source for all things TCU. Only on frogstoday.com.
Dave's Hot Chicken is a cult favorite and now has 2 locations in Fort Worth, Bryant Irvin Road on I-20 and Berry Street at TCU. Both owned and operated by Horned Frogs. Mention the Frogs Today show and get 10% off anytime. And order online at daveshotchicken.com.
Say hello to the water of tomorrow. Richard's Rainwater. Richard's Rainwater is 100% rain. Refreshing, renewable, and the only ingredient we use in our water. Why rain? Because everyone deserves access to clean water, and rain is a 100% renewable resource available everywhere. Drink the rain. Save the planet. Shop now at richardsrainwater.com.
At Higginbotham, we put people first. So we simply start by listening to you. Whether you're searching for customized insurance, HR, or financial solutions to protect your home, car, health, business, or employees, our specialists are here to serve you, the people you care about, and your success. Higginbotham. Insurance, HR, and financial services. Inspired by you.
Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show. Jamie Plunkett here at Schollmaier Arena, getting you ready for the Horned Frogs to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. The Oklahoma State Cowboys today here at Schollmaier. It's hopefully the end of a 4-game losing streak for the Horned Frogs as they take on the Cowboys. Of course, the last time these two teams met, Oklahoma State got the better of them 79-73. But Mike Miles and Eddie Lampkin are returning to the court today, which should be a boon for the Frogs as well. Going back to that last time the Cowboys and the Horned Frogs met, one of the big issues in that game was rebounding. The Frogs found themselves on the losing end of the rebounding battle, and that was a significant thing when you consider the fact that TCU had to work so hard to cut into a big 20-point deficit in that game. They rebounded well during that stretch. They went on, I believe, a 22-3 stretch in the second half to climb back into that game against Oklahoma State before finally dropping. But we've seen this trend now from TCU basketball throughout this losing streak, where they play really solid basketball for about 30 minutes of a 40-minute basketball game. And then you get into the last few minutes there, reserves look tired from their expanded roles. The Frogs stop rebounding as well. They're a step slow on defense, and teams are able to, at that point, kind of squeeze them and pull away. We saw that against Oklahoma State up in Stillwater. We saw that here against Baylor last weekend. We saw that against Iowa State in their midweek loss up in Ames, Iowa earlier this week as well. The Frogs have not been able to close out games without their leading scorer or their leading rebounder in the lineup. But Miles and Lampkin are both back today. We're going to see how they impact the Frogs on the court. We've seen that before this season. When the Frogs are peaking with their full healthy roster, they're hard to beat. They beat Kansas by 20 points up in Lawrence. They've beaten Kansas State by 20 points. They've came back against Baylor, erased a 17-point deficit down in Waco to get that win as well. And taking care of Texas Tech and Oklahoma with ease this year already, too, here at Schollmaier Arena. Now, of course, when you have a guy coming back from a knee injury like Mike is, there's probably going to be a little bit of hesitation, a little bit of concern about how mentally he is going to be able to overcome that knee injury. But I will say this, I was out of practice this week. He was back at full practice on Monday, and he looked fast. He looked aggressive. He was competing for rebounds. He was playing tough defense. He did not look like a guy coming off of missing 5 games to a hyperextended right knee. So if that's the Mike Miles that the Horned Frogs get today against Oklahoma State, I think Frog fans have a lot to be hopeful for. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button yet. Amric Fields, when he was with me on the postgame show last weekend, said the same thing. It's not time to hit the panic button, Horned Frog fans, because there are still 5 games left in the regular season, and if you're getting your leading scorer back, now's as good a time as any to go on a little bit of a run. One thing to think about, too, as the Frogs get ready for this game today, is their free throw shooting was not where it needs to be. Earlier this week in their loss to Iowa State, the Frogs shot 6 of 18 from the free throw line. That's just not going to cut it, frankly. And Jamie Dixon has made it a point of emphasis for the Frogs to make their free throws this year. And until Wednesday, the Frogs had been doing that, shooting at about a 72% clip as a team, which is up from previous seasons under Dixon here at TCU. But 6 of 18 from the free throw line simply isn't going to cut it. The Frogs dropped both of their games to Iowa State now this season, losing that one 70-59. That one was a tough one for the Frogs, but if you notice a trend, we've talked about rebounding the last time they played Oklahoma State. The Frogs lost the rebounding battle against Iowa State as well. That's something that Jamie Dixon has been concerned about all season. At the beginning of the year, he talked about that they weren't rebounding as well, and he kind of wrote that off, saying, well, when you're getting more steals, getting more baskets in transition, that kind of thing tends to drop off. You can't be great at everything all at once. But with the loss of Mike Miles and with Eddie Lampkin, that rebounding deficit has become even greater for the Horned Frogs, and that's something that they're going to need to get resolved. They have a mantra this year: all 5 rebound, all 5 run. We've seen all 5 running in transition. We need to see all 5 rebounding here down the stretch in the regular season. Damian Baugh has been a boon for the Frogs in Mike Miles' absence. He's been playing incredibly well. Folks will remember the missed shot to lose against Baylor, but that's really, truly not what folks should be focusing on. Damian Baugh in the last 5 games has jumped his scoring average up almost a full 2 points this season. He's had 7 straight games of 10 or more points until that game against Iowa State where he only scored 7. He's shooting 43.8% from the field this year. He's aggressive. He's getting to the rim, but where he's really impressed me this year, frankly, is in his passing game. You look at Damian Baugh from last year to this year and what he's been able to do as far as facilitating this offense is concerned. He really was able, with Mike Miles out these last few games, to step into a major passing role. He was already leading the team in average assists per game before Miles was injured, but now he is improving that even more. He's averaging 4.5 assists per game. He hasn't had less than 5 dating all the way back to that game against Mississippi State. He's been doing an incredible job of getting the rest of the Horned Frogs involved on offense. Now, what we need to see from TCU on the offensive side of the ball, though, is more consistency from a scoring standpoint. When Baugh is facilitating and passing and getting guys open with his drives to the basket, that's great, but those guys also have to hit some shots. TCU's still not shooting well from three-point range. TCU's still not shooting well from the free throw line, and those two areas are areas of concern for TCU offensively. If TCU is going to allow opposing defenses to drop off of them on the perimeter and clog up the paint a little bit more, that's going to make life more difficult for guys like Damian Baugh and Mike Miles, Shahade Wells, to get into the paint with their drives and then kick out to their scorers on the perimeter, because defenses just aren't going to respect that quite as much. Now, you want to talk about how TCU can improve with Mike Miles on the court. Even if he's not at full health yet, even if he is on a minutes restriction, which I don't think he will be today, what we can know about Mike Miles is that he's going to draw attention away from guys like Damian Baugh, Micah Peavy, and Emmanuel Miller. So you might see a couple more open lanes today if Mike Miles is hovering around on the three-point line, if he's coming off of ball screens, moving off the ball. You're going to see defenses flex towards him, and that might be an opportunity for TCU to get some other guys involved on offense today. They need this win. There's no doubt about it. This is as close to a must-win game as TCU has encountered yet this season, with the Horned Frogs on a 4-game losing streak. But like I said, the Frogs have 5 more home games. They take on Oklahoma State today at 1 p.m. You can watch that game tip off on ESPN+. You can listen to Brian Estridge and John Denton on the call on the radio on 570 KLIF as well. Then on Monday night, Kansas comes to town for a big Monday matchup. Obviously, the Horned Frogs beat the Jayhawks earlier this year, 83-60 up in Lawrence. Now they're going to take on Kansas here at home. Would be a good resume-building win for the Frogs if they can get that one as well. Then the Frogs head on the road. They go to Lubbock. You'll remember that TCU opened up their Big 12 conference schedule with a win over the Red Raiders here at Schollmaier. Now they're going to head to Lubbock. That's next Saturday at 11 a.m. on ESPN2. Then they come home for their final home game of the regular season. The Horned Frogs will host Texas on Wednesday, March 1st at 8 p.m. That game will be on ESPN. Get out to the Schollmaier. Make sure you're here for that one as well. And then lastly, to close out the regular season, the Frogs travel up to Norman, play the last place Oklahoma Sooners at 2 p.m. on Saturday, March 4th. That's how the TCU Horned Frogs are going to close out their regular season here this season before they head to Kansas City to get ready for the Big 12 tournament. A run in that tournament will be critical for the Frogs' seeding in the NCAA tournament as well, which will begin the following weekend in March. March Madness is almost here, folks. Let's get excited, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The Frogs still have to win some basketball games between now and then in order to ensure that they make it into the tournament. We're going to get ready here. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, Olivia Lee is going to give us her sideline report from courtside here at Schollmaier.
Dave's Hot Chicken is a cult favorite and now has 2 locations in Fort Worth, Bryant Irvin Road on I-20 and Berry Street at TCU. Both owned and operated by Horned Frogs. Mention the Frogs Today show and get 10% off anytime. And order online at daveshotchicken.com.
At Higginbotham, we put people first. So we simply start by listening to you. Whether you're searching for customized insurance, HR, or financial solutions to protect your home, car, health, business, or employees, our specialists are here to serve you, the people you care about, and your success. Higginbotham. Insurance, HR, and financial services. Inspired by you.
For exclusive interviews and content on TCU recruits, subscribe now at frogstoday.com. Any sport, anytime. It's your source for all things TCU. Only on frogstoday.com.
Say hello to the water of tomorrow. Richards Rainwater. Richards Rainwater is 100% rain. Refreshing, renewable, and the only ingredient we use in our water. Why rain? Because everyone deserves access to clean water, and rain is a 100% renewable resource available everywhere. Drink the rain. Save the planet. Shop now at richardsrainwater.com.
The Flying T Club provides the everyday TCU fan and alum the ability to specifically support TCU student athletes. Flying T Club offers 3 levels of memberships. The Flying T Club is a nonprofit organization supporting the brand development of TCU student athletes through a series of unique event-based networking opportunities, which are exclusive to our members. These events provide a great social engagement tool for our members and student athletes alike. Follow them on Instagram at Flying T Club or online at flyingtclub.com.
Welcome back into the Frogs Today pregame show. Jamie Plunkett here live from Schollmaier Arena as we're about 40 minutes away from the Horned Frogs taking on the Oklahoma State Cowboys as the regular season closes down for TCU this year. 5 games left, including this one for the Horned Frogs. Mike Miles, again, is coming back today for TCU. Eddie Lampkin is returning to the lineup as well, and can't stress enough how important those 2 guys are to this roster right now. You know, I think we get lost sometimes in thinking about how teams should be able to overcome injuries. And on this 4-game losing streak, the Frogs have really proven one thing, and that's a challenge to do, especially when one of those guys out is your leading scorer. But in those moments where you're losing guys like Mike Miles and Eddie Lampkin, other guys have to step up. And so what we've seen is, as this guy stands in front of my camera right now, what we've seen is that guys like Shahade Wells, guys like Jacoby Coles and Xavier Cork have stepped into bigger roles on the court. Shahade Wells scoring in double digits for the Horned Frogs in the last few games as TCU's starting point guard. Jacoby Coles, though, I want to take a moment to call him out because I think he's done a tremendous job this season, not just from a reserve standpoint, but in an expanded role. That started at the beginning of the year. Jacoby Coles, with the incoming new strength and conditioning coach for TCU, Gary Christopher, they sat down this offseason and really put a plan together to transform Coles physically. He's lost about 20 pounds. He looks much more fit. He looks much more well-conditioned this season, and that's showing up not only on the court, but in the score sheet as well. Coles right now is TCU's 4th leading scorer, averaging just over 8 points per game. He's shooting his threes a little bit better than he was last year as well, which was an aspect of his game that TCU really needed from him this year. And I can't overstate how much his impact on this team has been a positive one so far this year. I see a lot of Frog fans criticizing him on social media, but Jacoby Coles has put this TCU team in a good position to win games more consistently than not. Just as kind of an example of that, let's look at his last 5 games with Mike Miles out. Let's go all the way back to the Mississippi State game. He 12 points against Mississippi State, 17 against West Virginia to lead the team, 15 against Oklahoma State, 11 against Kansas State, 15 against Baylor before 6 points against Iowa State, where the Frogs just had a terrible shooting night. GCU is in a worse spot without Jacoby Coles this year than they are with him, and so I think it's time for him to get some recognition. Another guy that I think deserves some recognition is Micah Peavy, TCU's best defender, is how he's referred to by head coach Jamie Dixon more often than not. But Peavy has taken his offensive game to another level as well this year. He had 13 points in that loss to Iowa State. He had 11 earlier again in the season against Kansas State as well. And his ability to create for himself and to create opportunities for his teammates is not only a good sign for the Frogs as they close out their season this year, but it's also a good sign for the Frogs as they move on into next year with some roster changes that are going to be happening. But now let's go ahead and throw it down to Olivia Lee down at the sideline. She's going to give us a quick update on Mike Miles as we get closer to game time. Olivia, take it away. All right, I understand we're having some technical difficulties getting to Olivia. We're going to try and get to that in just a moment here. But as we try to work on that, I want to continue talking about Micah Peavy and Jacoby Coles and a couple of these other reserves that have been contributing in a big way for the Horned Frogs. Another guy that we'd be remiss if we did not talk about is Xavier Coles. Xavier has stepped in a major way in Eddie Lampkin's absence, and what that's going to do with extended moments for Xavier Cork, for Shahade Wells, for Micah Peavy, for Jacoby Coles, for all these guys, what that's doing for the Horned Frogs is building up depth. And that can't be understated going into tournament time this time of year in college basketball. Yes, rosters start to shrink. Yes, your starters start to play a little bit more minutes. But for the Horned Frogs, what the benefit's going to be is when those guys like Mike Miles come out, when Eddie Lampkin has to come out, when Emmanuel Miller has to come out, they now know that they can trust some of those reserves just a little bit more than they maybe would have if they didn't have the level of experience that they've been gaining during this streak without Mike and Eddie in the lineup. So it's good news for the Frogs that they've been able to build up their depth. It's even better news that Mike Miles and Eddie Lampkin are coming back today because the Frogs can hope to get on a winning streak to counter the losing streak they've been on in the last few minutes. I think if we're ready for Olivia's package now, we can go ahead and throw it back down to Olivia Lee. She's courtside to give us the latest on Mike Miles and the Horned Frogs.
Hey, Jamie, and we are here courtside. Miles is warming up behind me with the team, not looking like he's favoring his knee or leg, which is a good sign for the Horned Frogs here today. They're coming off a 4-game losing streak and really looking for number one to refocus this team and lead them to a win over Oklahoma State. Coach Dixon spoke with media yesterday and shared they're looking forward to having Miles on the court and playing with the team. Well, you know, I can feel the pressure on Miles and here in the arena as students and fans trickle in, hoping for a victory here in Fort Worth.
Thanks, Olivia, for that report. Appreciate you and all that you do for us over here at Frogs Today. As we close out this pregame show now, going to let you guys get over to ESPN Plus to check in on the Horned Frogs and the Cowboys as they tip off in about half an hour. I do want to point out one more thing, and that is the fact that TCU, sitting at 7th in the Big 12, would mean that 7 Big 12 teams are currently lined up to make the NCAA tournament. That would be the highest percentage for any conference as far as putting teams in the NCAA tournament at 70%, 7 of 10. Is how you do that math. I can't do much math, but I can do that math, which is nice. But you think about the depth of this conference, the competition week in and week out, game in and game out. It's difficult to win basketball games even when you're completely healthy. And the Frogs have been far from that for at least the last 2.5 weeks now. So this stretch of last 5 games is not going to be easy for TCU as they try to bolster their standings and build up their resume a little bit more entering tournament time. But what you can expect from these Horned Frogs and what we've seen from them all year under Jamie Dixon is that they're going to play a tough brand of defense. They're going to scrap and fight for every loose ball. And if they start to win some of those loose ball battles and win on the rebounding edge again with the return of Eddie Lampkin, I think this is going to be a pretty tough team to out when it comes to the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament. Of course, first and foremost, they've got to get past Oklahoma State and Mike Boynton's crew of Cowboys that are coming down from Stillwater for this game today. The Cowboys are also looking to bolster their tournament resume. They sit at 6th in the conference and I believe 7-6 in conference play with a winning record overall. They're a bubble team right now, according to some of those national experts who project stuff like that. So, TCU, it's an important win today. It's important to start a winning streak for the Horned Frogs. For all of our folks over at Frogs Today, though, want to say thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for dealing with our few technical difficulties. We appreciate you. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button on this video. Leave me a comment underneath so you can tell me how I did. And make sure that you're subscribed over at frogstoday.com too, where you'll catch all of the latest news, not just for TCU hoops, but for football, baseball, and all of the other sports that the Frogs offer as well. We've got you covered, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, rifle, tennis, swimming and diving, women's hoops, whatever it might be. We're covering it over at Frogs Today and frogstoday.com. So subscribe there, hop in the forums, and have a conversation with us. For the rest of the Frogs Today crew, I'm Jamie Plunkett. We're going to let you go watch the Horned Frogs take on the Cowboys here now on ESPN+. Make sure you join us after the game for the post-game show right back here on the Frogs Today YouTube channel and frogstoday.com. Until then, Jamie Plunkett.